And welcome to the Midday Show. I am Jeff Everett. He is Mark Messina. We were trying to decide what to talk about today. We were going through some news stories. And then I said, hey, Forbes put out the 400 richest Americans. And it started going off on a bunch of different topics. So we decided we would unveil the list today to you guys. Talk about the state of wealth in America a little bit. Focus on a couple of people on the list. Young money, old money, tech, crypto, who got booted from the list. Before we get to the wealth of the American economy, Mark, how are you feeling today?
I know this is going to be a spoiler.
No.
Neither of us are on the list.
So you brought up, you said first no Emmy, and you said now we didn't make the Forbes 400.
We are having a tough fall.
It's been a very tough fall.
We are not going to talk about any baseball today. That is off the radar. So we'll just go right into this.
Why aren't we talking about baseball today?
Is there
a particular reason?
I just think, we should, vary the topics. And we talked a little baseball yesterday. I don't really want to talk about baseball.
I say this to you all the time in 30 seconds or less, and I really mean 30 seconds or less. Is the Green Monster fair?
Oh, it's fantastic.
You're pro Green Monster?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And it cost the Yankees last night.
Yes, it did.
As a kid, I was like, it's so short. It creates doubles. It also keeps some home runs in the park. And it's also because guys play closer. So it does change. It's cool, though.
It's
really cool.
very neat. It adds a different element to it. So the Forbes 400, it's essentially considered like the definitive ranking for the richest people in America. They make a list of 400. This year, it's a record. In 2021, if you add up all of the wealth, it's $3.2 trillion within the Forbes 400, which is obviously, again, a record. It's up $240 billion from the year before, which is also a record. It's the largest gap from one year to the next. Aided by a stock market that has defied the virus. This is from Forbes. Jeff Bezos is back on top of the list. Bill Gates is there as well. And there are 9 returnees who fell off from the list. We're going to get to all of that. The overall numbers still astound me. Like, I know you and I have talked about like the wealth in America and how much these people are making. It's almost to the point where you say the numbers and you're almost kind of numb to it because you can't. You need like an analogy or a comparison, and like, what is the analogy or the comparison for $3.2 trillion?
Well, and that's a good point. And this is going totally off of the topic that we weren't going. I've always said this I think Biden sucks at this. When he was campaigning and he was taught, he would throw those numbers out. Okay. Like we had this a trillion and a billion. And you're right. Once you get to we know $1 million, we know $2 million. Once you get to the difference in our practical world between 100 million and 2 billion, and it's a pile that is so big, it's irrelevant to us. And he used to stammer over it all the time. And the other thing is that people who aren't math people, they hear numbers and they break into a sweat. Okay. So he needs an advisor to tell him. And I know lots of politicians do this I thought Biden was the worst at it. Mm-hmm. He just fires out these math stats like it's helping his argument. And half the people don't listen because they hate math. And the other half are like, well, what's the difference between a billion and a trillion? It's a huge number or a huger number, but we can't relate to it.
Well, the numbers without a story or without a comparison they're hard. Like, and I mean that in the sense of like, they're boring. Right. Like sometimes it's not even about comprehending them. It's just like you zone out. Like the numbers aren't as fascinating as an analogy or a neat comparison. And that is one of the struggles I think a lot of politicians struggle with is they know these facts, they know these statistics, and they have them and they know that it helps promote their cause, but they fail very often to attach it to some type of story or analogy to comparison to like link us in. Right. So I agree with that.
So anyway, sorry about the tangent. Back to the rich people.
So the two things that I've noticed to like try to, I guess, make that a relevant number. There was a guy on TikTok who was taking mounds of rice, and each rice represented, I think it was like $1,000. Each grain of rice represented $1,000 or 10 grand or 100 grand. I forget what it was. And he basically lumped it up and he was like, here's what somebody who makes 100 grand a year, this is what their amount looks like. And then at the very end was this massive pile of rice. They needed like a tarp on the ground to like have this. And it was like, it was Bezos, portfolio. And that helped put the, into reference. The other one I saw is there's a website. I don't know if you've ever seen this or not. I think it's Spend Bill Gates Money. And you can buy luxury trips and jets and mansions, and like you can buy cheeseburgers, like you can buy. So basically you're clicking the button like if you were shopping on Amazon or any other store, and you just keep going until you've spent all of Jeff Bezos, or I think it's Bill Gates's money. And that is fascinating because you're sitting there clicking and you're buying like all this stuff. And then when you look, like you've spent 1/100th of it, like you're not even close to going through the wealth that they have accumulated. The last part, and I don't know if you really have an opinion on this or not.
I do.
The gap from last year to this year being the highest it's ever been. When you think about what this country just went through and what we've kind of put up with for 18 to 24 months, and for the record to be the biggest gap in the Forbes 400 from the year before to the next one, I think it was 240 billion.
That's what I said.
It doesn't feel great. It doesn't sit great.
No, and that's one of the things that, and I'm a realtor, and in the real estate market, when the pandemic hit, we were petrified. And just like everything else, it shut down and you couldn't show houses. There was like 6 weeks and you really couldn't do anything. And then we were all braced for what does the other side of this look like?
Right.
And nobody, I'm sure there was one person, but we were petrified. And all of a sudden, houses start going on the market and people are gobbling them up because stimulus checks are coming to help the people that were hurt by the pandemic. But there were lots of people that weren't hurt by the pandemic. And we found out another surprising aspect. We know shop owners, depending on what business you're in, and they had the biggest years ever because people are cleaning out their closets and they need to do this. And I know jewelers did well. I know contractors did well.
Stores.
Yes, because people are staring at their walls.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, there's a project that we don't have anything else to do. Let's repaint the living room. And that's what we think in real estate, that people felt too claustrophobic because the family was home together all the time. And they're like, we need a bigger house. And so there were lots of people that were hurt by the pandemic. There were lots of people who killed it during the pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
And that's one of the realities. When you flip on the other side, no matter which side of the aisle you're on, even Republicans will tell you, when Donald Trump got elected president, there was going to be nothing about being rich that was going to get worse when Donald Trump was president. So the fact that the rich people are now getting richer at a faster rate than is not surprising to anyone. Or at least it shouldn't be surprising to anyone.
I don't think it's surprising. I think it's just once you hear the number, like when Forbes 400, when it's a record year and that it goes up $240 billion, I mean, that's a lot of money. I think it doubled what would be like the average exponential of what it would have went up. So it's not like 240 billion would have been like if nothing had happened.
A little bit better.
It almost doubled what the typical incline exponentially would have been for the Forbes 400. It's pretty incredible.
Well, and I think too, with what Bezos has done with Amazon, the founding fathers never thought this could happen, that essentially one person could own everything.
Sure.
Because back in their colonial and their village days, they were like, well, if this guy tries to own too much, the citizenry will get mad at this guy and they will shop other places and they will help each other out. But they don't realize that when this guy owns everything and makes it convenient for everyone, then the
logistical timing too. I mean, I would imagine when the founding fathers were doing this and coming up with it, the idea that someone would have the ability in a day to get done what Bezos can do with Amazon was just, it wasn't like the idea that, I mean, you couldn't even make a pair of shoes in a day, and now like he's selling hundreds of thousands of them in a day, so.
And all across the country.
All across the country, all across the world. So it is, yes, we've jumped into a time where a lot of the things that we thought were true, just forget like it's coming, like it's here. It is. And we're going to talk about like tech and crypto a little bit as we move on. Going back to the list. So the Forbes 400, Number one was Jeff Bezos. His net worth is officially over $200 billion. Obviously, he is an Amazon. Number two, any guesses?
You'd mentioned Gates, but that seems too obvious.
He's close.
Zuckerberg?
It's going to be Elon Musk.
Oh, yeah.
Elon Musk at 190.5, obviously with Tesla and SpaceX. Number three, you just mentioned Mark Zuckerberg, 134.5 billion with Facebook. Number four, Bill Gates comes into play. Microsoft. Are there people off the top of your head that you would think are like in the top 20, top 15?
See, always when you think of this, you think of like Arab oil sheiks, but this is just an American
It's just
list.
Americans, yes.
So,
which really, it does change, like to your point, like not having kind of like the natural resource, like oil's kind of out of it. To be honest, like timber's kind of like there's no real natural resource inside the top.
I mean, you think Jobs would have been up there if he was alive?
I mean, I would argue in the top 30, there is not an actual natural resource tycoon in the top 30.
Is Oprah in the top 30?
Oprah is not in top 30. We're actually going to talk about Oprah later. So here's
yeah, I'm trying to think of.
So here's some that I'm guessing like you know, but you wouldn't have guessed. Larry Page for Google is number 5.
Oh, okay, yeah, I wouldn't have.
Makes a lot of sense. Larry Ellison, who's been all over software. I believe he started with Microsoft. He is at 117 billion, number 7. Warren Buffett still comes in at number 8.
Oh, yeah.
Steve Ballmer, who owns the Clippers and was part of Microsoft, is at number 9. He's just under 100 billion shy. And then Michael Bloomberg is still number 10.
Bloomberg, really?
Yep. Bloomberg number 10, 70 billion for Bloomberg LP. Some other quick ones here that I just want to go through. Nike, which I don't know if people associate Nike with being like, Nike's number 14, Phil Knight and family. So the 14th richest.
So here's my dumb question. When you just said Nike, Phil Knight is still alive, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yep. We also have Walmart, Jim Walton is number 11.
Well, Sam was his dad.
Yes, and he inherited a third of his father's like estate and wealth, I believe.
There were 3 kids, and
yes.
Okay, and then
because number 12 is Alice Walton, who is just behind Jim Walton. So that is the Walmart estate coming into play.
Because one of them invested more money and one of them gave more to charity.
That is correct, because number 13 is Rob Walton, and he is behind his sister and brother.
I would bet it's all about, and obviously which investments they pick.
Sure.
But I'll bet it's also who gave more away.
Who gave more away, who's spending. And we're going to talk about that too. They have a philanthropy score, which is fascinating to go through and look at.
So who's a good person and who's a prick? Is that what we're saying?
Well, and not only that, you can kind of start to see trends. And we're going to dive into that a little bit too. The Koch family, I'm sure you've heard of.
Oh, Coca-Cola. Oh, no, not
Koch Industries.
Yes.
K-O-C-H.
Because aren't they huge political supporters?
Yes.
If you have the Kochs on your side,
you've got a good. Yes. Let's put it this way: you are going to be able to get whatever you need.
Yes.
If you have them on your side. So that's just some of them. The last one that I recognize and most people would recognize, number 21 is Jacqueline Mars, and she is the heir to the candy company.
M&M's is a Mars.
And they also got into pet food very early as well. They're
really?
A huge pet food provider. So she's number 20. But those are just some of the names at the top of the list. Going through and looking at it, tech made up 16 of the top 30 in America. And then I guess like you can call it retail or product space. I'm not really sure like how you would want to define it. But when you go like Amazon, Walmart, Nike, like those types, they made up 9 out of the top 30.
Is there a Target, or was Target always a publicly traded?
I'm not sure, because Target may fall under a name that I'm not recognizing. Like it may not.
And that might not have been as private. That might have been a corporation from the get-go.
A really sneaky one, and you and I think we might have talked about this before, but kind of like the whole tax industry and what a like, kind of like a fraud, like what a scam it is.
A racket?
Yes, and not so much the actual taxes that you're charged by our government, but the processing of it. Because there was a plan in place decades ago. The government was basically going to do your taxes for you. They were going to say, they were going to send you a slip. This is what you owe. And you would send it in and you would be done with it. And if you wanted to file like not a complaint.
If you wanted to complain.
Yeah,
an appeal.
If you wanted to appeal it, you could, but they basically had the number and they were going to send it to you. Basically the people who do Quicken basically went to the government and said, if you do this, like, we're out of business, here's a check and we'll do all of this for you. And it is not a small business, because the founder of Quicken Loans, Daniel Gilbert, is number 23 on this list.
Wow.
Yes. So you want to talk, like, it is not it's not a small business. Let's put it that way. Whatever check was cut 2 or 3 decades ago to keep the tax industry in business was worth every penny. They certainly made out on that.
Yes. And that's, to get back to politics again, that's one of the problems that the founding fathers never thought, was that the rich people pay so much to get these people elected, and then these people get elected and take care of the rich people who got them elected.
Sure.
So, and it's a never-ending cycle.
Yeah, pretty crazy. I will say at number 32, and you and I have talked about this before, cryptocurrency. We're going to talk about him when we get to Young Money. Sam Bankman-Fried, have you ever heard of him? So his number one, and it makes up the majority of his portfolio, is cryptocurrency. He is now 32 at 22.5 billion. He did not make the list last year, and he is now number 32.
In the top, he wasn't in the top 400. Now he's 32.
400 last year. He is now number 32, and his only real investment in his portfolio is cryptocurrency. He is a fascinating person. If you can imagine that.
Do you have any idea how much he started with?
I don't know. I don't know his full portfolio or what he had started with. But we can go right there. So there's 15 people under the age of 40 on the list.
Zuckerberg's still one of them.
Zuckerberg is still one of them. But the first one on is Sam Bankman-Fried. He's 29, 22.5 billion cryptocurrency. So here's the quick 2 lines on it. He runs a company called FTX. Its headquarters used to be in Hong Kong. They are now moving to the Bahamas because the Bahamas have actual regulations for cryptocurrency that promote the use of cryptocurrency instead of demoting the use of cryptocurrency. Okay. So he is leaving Hong Kong to set up his FTX headquarters there. And this is just some of the things he's done. If you watch a Major League Baseball game, you'll see on the umpires, there's an FTX patch. That is his company. He also bought the naming rights to the Miami Heat's new arena. It will be the FTX Arena.
Okay. Now I saw a story about a guy who was with some company.
This is a great story.
And made a lot of money, but then there was an issue that he got. Oh, no, I know who it was.
Okay.
Wasn't it in The Social Network?
Uh-huh.
The guy who got screwed.
Okay.
You know who I mean?
Yes.
He ended up making a lot of money anyway.
Probably.
I don't say they took it. He lives in Hong Kong now.
Okay.
He left the States and he went, because this is when I watch true-ish stories,
right.
And I'm sure The Social Network wasn't perfect, but I think the gist of it was factual.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, so what happened to this? What happened to the brothers? What happened to this guy? What happened? And that guy, I can't remember his name. Do you remember his name from The Social Network?
Off the top of my head.
He was the financier at first. They used his family's credit card to get it going.
Right.
He something, and he moved to Hong Kong and started a business. And I was thinking that must be him, but it wouldn't be him. We would know that.
It's not him. However, he is incredibly brilliant. They did
Which one is he? The Social Network guy or this guy?
The guy who financed Facebook originally for Zuckerberg. But he was, even before that, his investments in his portfolio and the things he was doing, he's not a coder like Zuckerberg, right. But he is brilliant. What he's able to do as far as math skills, statistics, it's really, really impressive.
I've always wondered what their relationship is now.
It's probably, I just don't know how you ever truly recover. I'm sure you can be cordial, but I don't know. To just kind of to bring up something like a North Central PA, you look at what happened with some of these natural gas leases. When there was the fracking boom and people came in and family leases were being in. I mean, there were families that were torn apart from that. And I had from experience and talking to people, like I can tell you, like some of that stuff is just like you can't repair it. You can be cordial, you can sit down for dinner, but you'll never have the relationship you had before. And I would imagine that's what their relationship is like.
And this is even there, and we're talking like everyone's seen The Social Network. If you haven't, you should have. It's like there are relationships that go bad. There are affairs. There's infidelity in romantic relationships, and people, time heals all wounds and people get past. But yes, in this one, the premeditation of it, we're going to restructure the company and you only get this much, even though you were here from the beginning. Now, I also understand it would be fascinating if you were inside it, because you're right. He wasn't a coder and he was supposed to be the financial guy. And then they brought in the Napster guy who helped him get real financing. Right. And that took him to a new level. So it's almost like, hey, we had this team at the beginning. You were a big part of the beginning, but you didn't help us to get to where we were.
So the best argument that and again, the movie's close. It's not a perfect representation of what happened, but it's very close. It's well done. I've always said, if you wanted to defend Zuckerberg, because I love The Social Network and I love any Finch movie, I'm like all in on. So I've seen it dozens of times. If you wanted to defend Zuckerberg in that movie or even in the real relationship, there is this sense of when they go to, when they're at Harvard, nobody older than them thought this was a $1 billion business, correct? Right? The whole kind of principle of a lot of the movie is that 99% of the world thought this was just some random project or this was something cute, or it wasn't. No one really, the the creator of Napster, Zuckerberg, and a couple of coders thought it was going to be a $1 billion industry. And so the irony in their friendship was he believed in Zuckerberg enough to give him the initial finance. But once he gave him the initial finance, he clearly didn't see it as a $1 billion company. He thought it was a starter company. He thought it was. So in a weird way, if you wanted to defend Zuckerberg, he clearly didn't have the vision that Zuckerberg had. Now, that doesn't make what Zuckerberg did fair or kind or morally correct. But I think you could argue, if you're Zuckerberg, did he have the same vision as some of the people around him? Probably not.
I think there's lots of ways when you go through all of it to defend Zuckerberg. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure because it's just such a huge, and I'm sure there's ways to criticize too, because with everyone there's ways to, but I think there's lots of aspects to defend Zuckerberg.
No, I agree with that.
It is, when you see the movie, you feel bad for the guy.
You feel bad for his friend, you mean?
For his friend.
Yes.
You can't help but feel bad for him. That's why I wanted to. And even though he got I think he ended up with less than 1%.
It was not a lot.
But it's still he's rich beyond words.
Sure.
So it is. Yeah. So you walk into a room. How much is Zuckerberg worth? 120?
No, I think it's 170 something now.
Billion.
Yeah.
Okay. So he has 170 billion, and somebody else just has 1 measly billion. Does it affect their lives? It can't.
I think it does, in the sense. I just think it goes past money.
It does. Emotionally, you're right. Emotionally, you were cheated on or whatever, and you can't get over it.
Well, there's also,
I get that.
You're also, if you were his financier, there's also, you lacked the vision. And so there has to be an aspect of, not only did you screw me over, but there's also the regret of what did I not see? I think I'm this really smart guy and right. I think I'm brilliant, but even I didn't see that coming. And so you now have to kind of live with that aspect of just always, it's not regret, but maybe remorse, the idea of just, why didn't I see what I should have saw? And I think that would be the most unrepairable thing in their relationship. Every time he sees Zuckerberg, that's what he has to think of.
Maybe.
That's what I think.
It's
some of the other younger ones. I'm sure you have younger kids. I'm sure you've heard of Snapchat.
A little bit.
Okay. Evan Spiegel of Snapchat, $13.8 billion at age 31.
How does that? I don't get that.
You don't get Snapchat, or you don't get?
I mean, I don't get it. I don't get why it's worth so much money.
13.1 billion?
Yes.
With Snapchat?
Yes.
A lot of it's the advertising. There's also the user, like, eventually you just get to a point where when you have so many users and you have such a following and you have the accounts and you have the emails, your reach just exceeds a dollar amount. So if I'm a company that wants to advertise, or I have to have an account, or just that alone makes you worth X amount. The ability to just reach X amount of people.
This is going to show how clueless I am.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll say this because I'm the old clueless person. When Snapchat came out,
Mm-hmm.
my first thought is, this is just a different way to text.
It was more private.
And the other aspect is whatever you text deletes.
Yes.
That's it?
But when you say that's it, the way kids communicate now, and even when I was in college, the way we communicated, you would just say things to your friends that you wouldn't want the chance of somebody else seeing, whether it was just like an inside joke or whatever it was. So like Snapchat just became the way of communicating.
Because it deleted.
Because it deleted. It almost became privacy. Most people thought like it was the nudie platform.
Correct.
But really what it became was just privacy. It just became a place where you knew you could share a photo, you could share a thought, you could share a joke, and I don't want to use the word repercussion, but the afterthought of it, there was no afterthought of it because it was gone. And now life, and the funny part now is I'm shocked. The way you say, like, I don't get it, I'm shocked it's not bigger. I'm shocked that it didn't become, I think they missed an opportunity to really take over that space, like the private messaging space. Because now you look at how many people wish they would have sent something privately, or wish they had the ability to take back what they sent or take back what they said. I'm shocked it's only 13.8.
So you're saying, and I agree, back from my generation, the thing was about nude pictures. Send nude picture, it deletes. That was how it was translated to us. This is what Snapchat is. You're saying it's basically like having a conversation without, because I know from like being in all aspects of society, whether it be personal, professional, there are times when I've been told, make sure you text it or email it so you have it in writing.
Yeah.
Whether it's a client, whether it's a whatever, a parent, if it's a sports issue or whatever, make sure you have it in writing. Then there's also been times it's like you want to have this conversation personally, so it's not in writing.
Right.
And you're saying that Snapchat is that conversation that's not in writing.
Think of it this way. So when you were going through college, when you wanted to talk to a girl, you went up and talked to the girl. But when you walk away from that conversation.
When I was in college, I'm so old, we had to go up and ask her father if it was okay to talk to the girl.
I'm sure you didn't. So when you would walk up, as soon as you walked away, if she turned you down, when you turn and walk away, there's no crumbs. There's no regret. There's no remorse.
The tears flowing down.
But you turn around and you wake up the next day. And if you want to act like it didn't happen, who's to say it didn't? Eventually the world switched over to now we communicate more through text. Like we write more of our communication than
we speak
ever before. The downside to that is when that is the form of communication, if you hit on a guy or a girl, or you try to ask somebody out on a date, there is a trail now. And so there is this kind of regret, remorse, called the breadcrumbs of your despair, call it. However you want to explain it, Snapchat kind of does away with that. You can go for it. You can be forward. You can take risks. You can do things that you would never be able to do in a written communication on that platform. I'm shocked. I'm not saying they messed up, but I think they should be worth more than 13.8 billion when you think about the way we communicate today and the privacy of it. I'm not saying they messed up, but it should be worth more.
I don't like the negative connotation of your tone. You said if I went up to a girl and got rejected, you immediately think I get rejected. Then you throw in despair. Like, what about the joys? And it could be the breadcrumbs of your excitement. But when you're talking about this, you said my rejection and my despair. And I don't like that.
I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. So to give you an idea, Snapchat raked in a record $982 million of revenue in the second quarter of this year.
Almost $1 billion in the quarter.
Yep.
How many people are on Snapchat? Does it say?
It's a great question. It does not say.
Okay. I mean, when you put it that way, it makes sense that it is a. But I guess and that's the thing, in the world, I guess it just depends how much stuff you text. One of the things I love about text is that it's still there. And when I'm looking back for names or addresses or properties or what time does the bus leave or this and that, and they texted me the schedule, that it's still there and I could. So one of the things I love about it is that there is a permanent record.
Yes.
I guess it just depends what stage of life you're in, what conversations you're having.
Right.
You don't want that record.
I think if you're an adult or you're somebody who has a stable life, you've kind of figured out what you want to do, where you need to be, who's a part of your life. What you're saying makes perfect sense. If you are somebody who has not figured that out.
If you're 17 years old.
If you're somebody who hasn't figured that out yet, and sometimes you say things you regret, you're still trying to figure out what's right or wrong. Snapchat is I don't want to call it a valuable tool, but it is amazing what you are able to kind of push off to the side with Snapchat.
Okay, then help me with this. I think I have this right. The girl from Mahanoy that went to the Supreme Court.
Yep.
Her case went to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
She sent out a group snap, did she not?
Yes.
I thought it was a Snapchat group.
I believe she either put it on her story or she put it in a group. I believe she put it on her story, which your story can only be viewed by people that are friends with you. Like the public cannot view her Snapchat.
But that doesn't delete.
It does delete after 24 hours.
Okay, but the girl who saw it was the daughter of the coach.
Yes.
And she's like, hey, Mom, look at this.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, interesting.
Makes sense?
Yeah.
The Walmart kids who we already talked about are on here as some of the younger ones. After that, it is mostly crypto and stock exchange. The only other one on here that was worth mentioning is the creator of Airbnb, which have you ever used Airbnb?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So they are now at $10 billion, 38 years old. I'm going to mess up the last name. Nathan Blacharczyk.
That and Uber are two companies that are so freaking fascinating to me because as a child, all we were taught is don't get in cars with strangers, don't get in cars with strangers. Then all of a sudden, we would rather get in a car with a stranger than a taxi. Like there's no Williamsport taxi company anymore, is there? They're out of business.
I've never used them.
I think they're out of business.
Okay.
And it is just that the trust of it. They're like, they're registered and and then, with Airbnbs, you've seen the stories. I don't know about, I don't want to say sinister, voyeuristic, shall we say?
Sure.
Of, you're just going into somebody's property. Like at a hotel, there's just a belief, and this is what they do. But you go stay in someone's house, you don't know what cameras are there, you don't know what microphones are there, you don't know what. Now, and I'm sure that 99% of them are fine. But now there's a business that they have devices that you can walk around a room. And you can see, because if you've ever looked on the cameras, the super spy stuff, it looks like an alarm clock. It looks like a smoke detector. It looks like, and the nanny cam stuff. Well, now they have devices that you walk through a room to make sure there's no So it's just like, do you want to go stay in a hotel? Or do you want to go stay in someone's house that you don't know, that you don't? And like, I'll go stay in a house.
I think one of the, I've never done an Uber by myself, and I've never done an Airbnb by myself. And I think that if I were to get an Uber by myself, maybe I'd be more antsy. If I were to get an Airbnb by myself, maybe I would be more antsy. There's something about like the communal aspect of both of those apps and both of those processes.
I don't think I've ever ridden in an Uber, by the way.
Yeah. So you get my point is what you're saying.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've never, but I've stayed when Mike got in the Hall of Fame, we got a place through Airbnb and it was,
I mean, I know people in the city that will not get an Uber by themselves.
okay. And I guess that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's just different. If you would have said, you know, now that you're like, oh, everyone uses it. It's the greatest thing ever. But there was a time you're just going to have people just drive you around as taxi cabs. And why would anyone, when they could ride in a taxi cab, why would they ride with you? And, you know, and here's the other thing. As how many people are Uber drivers? You're just going to pick up a stranger. You know, that was the other thing. Don't pick up hitchhikers. They could be dangerous. They could be, and it fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
I've never thought of it that way. I guess just the internet, smartphones, GPS location, knowing where you are, the fact that most of the time you do it with another person. I think when you add all of those things up, I think to a younger generation, it's why wouldn't you?
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I hadn't thought of that. So those are some of the younger variations of who's on the Forbes 400. The old money, we already talked about. Warren Buffett's still in the top 10. Page is still in the top 10. I'm forgetting some. Bill Gates is still in the top 10. However, there were few that fell out of the ranks of the Forbes 400. One of them being Donald Trump fell out of the Forbes 400. Oprah fell out of the Forbes 400. I don't know if the Trump one does surprise me. I'm surprised Trump fell out of the Forbes 400 only because being able to capitalize, and maybe he's spending it at a rate that like I don't even comprehend, but just being able to capitalize on his movement and what has taken place in the last 5, 6, 7 years, the merchandise alone, I'm still blown away that he fell off of this list.
It's surprising to me too. I haven't gone into deep thought about it.
I mean, I understand that he's certainly not riding the tech wave. He's certainly not riding the crypto wave. There are certain waves in which the wealth is moving, and I have no doubt that he has not jumped onto those. But is there anybody, when you just think of name brand alone, polarizing, you hate it, you love it, whatever it is, just the brand alone, I just can't imagine he fell off of this list, and he did.
I would have not thought of it either. But, I mean, how much does he, when the world shut down because of the pandemic, how much did that hurt his businesses? Because he has the hotels and he has things like that, you know, golf course, although golf was busy during the pandemic because you're allowed to do it.
So he could be someone who returns to the list. Oprah's right now net worth $2.6 billion. She first appeared on the Forbes 400 in 1995, and she has been on the list ever since. So this is the first year. So quick math would say over 25 years, first time not on the list for Oprah.
I mean, her leaving regular television, she did a lot of the old things. She started a TV network. Mm-hmm. She started a magazine. When's
the last time you've read a magazine? That was the perfect answer. You don't even need to say anything. That was perfect.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'll say this, we get some because when I was Christmas shopping, it was one of these things like you get 3 free months of these.
Yes.
So I got, like, for my kids, I was like, well, we'll get National Geographic because they like that stuff. And I think we got 2. I think I got People for my mom, and I got National Geographic for my kids. So there are magazines that lay in our house.
Sure.
When's the last time I picked one of them up and read them?
Right. So she was one of the last American entertainers to be on the list. So this was another fascinating thing when I was reading about her. There was a time, like early 2000s, 90s, 80s, where as a celebrity, your fame could kind of lead you onto the Forbes list.
Okay.
If you were a high enough paid actor, if you were a high enough paid athlete, that is almost gone. The actual wealth being made by tech, by crypto, by stock exchange, like it has gone into a place where celebrity status or entertainment, your fee of doing that entertainment is not enough to put you on the Forbes 400 anymore, which I find this sounds weird. I don't know if that's a good thing. There's 400 people in this country that have wealth that is so high that the most entertaining person in our country is not even in the stratosphere of those 400 people.
No, I get that. I mean, I'm just thinking from a totally other aspect. Imagine you had $1 billion. Imagine you're on this list.
In order to be on this list, you got to have at least 3.
Okay, whatever. $1 billion's plenty for my example.
Okay.
3 billion's fine. So part of life's challenge is to make a living, to survive, to try to make more of a living, or to have dreams of bigger dreams of success. Once you've reached it, there's almost the aspect of then what? And I see like Tiger Woods kind of went off the rails because he'd set out in life to be the greatest golfer ever, and he did, and then what?
Right.
And so for all these people, like the ability to find then what has to be challenging because did you ever see the Thomas Crown Affair?
I don't think so.
You should watch it. I would loan you the movie, but you'd never watch it. You never give it back because that's what happens with all the other movies.
I also don't have a VCR or a DVD player.
No one has a VCR anymore.
Okay.
But be that as it may, he was uber rich and he was bored to death because, he's in the movie, he's on the golf course making $100,000 bets that he can hole out from the bunker just to try to bring excitement to his life.
Sure.
But they talked about, Jordan with the gambling and how much money they lost. And, Charles Barkley. Charles Barkley can't put $25 down on a blackjack hand and care.
Excited. Right.
It doesn't, when you draw 21 or when the dealer breaks, it doesn't even move the needle for you. So it has to be enough that you feel it with the win or the loss. So what happens when you have it would be, I don't know.
I get your point. But doesn't it also say something about the system? I've always been told this. The first million's the hardest. And once you have $1 million, it's almost hard to not make money.
I would believe that.
Like you almost have to actively try to not make money once you've made your first $1 million. I've been told that for a very, very long time.
I can believe that.
And so, what does that say about the system? Is that I'm not saying I'm smart enough to tell you how our financial system should be run, but it is the irony that once you get there, once you make it, now it becomes it's easy. Now it's almost too easy. To your point, it's so easy and there's so much around you that now you have to do things on a level where you can feel it, where it makes sense. I've just always wondered what that says, that once you make $1 million, you're almost tripping over it. You have to actively decide, I'm not investing. I'm not doing this. It's just going to sit there and I'm just going to, and even if you let it sit there, the interest. So I don't know. I think it's interesting if you're someone like an Oprah. I don't even know if Oprah's goal was to be a billionaire. I really believe that. I don't know if Oprah, I'm sure for her from a philanthropy. There you go. From that aspect, I'm sure it mattered to her. I do for Oprah.
Right. But at some point she was like, I can make a lot of money. I might as well.
Yes.
But she didn't, when she was a 19-year-old kid, she wasn't thinking, how do I be a billionaire?
Probably. I would imagine she was not. Do you remember John Paul DeJoria?
No.
You don't remember him at all?
I remember John Paul Jones.
Okay. He made his wealth in hair products and tequila. You don't recognize
hair products and tequila.
If you saw him, you would recognize him. He fell off the list. He's at $2.8 billion.
Is there tequila in the hair products? I'm missing that.
No.
That's an odd combination.
It'd be a deadly combination.
It's like there's that sign that used to be on, and I don't know the business, this 30 years ago.
Yeah.
It was like sporting goods and produce.
Yeah.
You're like, that's what your store is?
Yeah.
Sport. So you have produce and then like shotgun shells? And you just
Possibly.
sell them, you just buy them at the same register?
Sounds like Walmart to me. The the co-founder of Gap is off the list, Doris Fisher, 2.8 billion. And that's pretty much like Gerald Ford. He was big in banking. Do you recognize that name?
He was big in government too.
Well, that's a different Gerald Ford.
Oh.
This Gerald Ford was big in banking. The other thing I noticed when you go through the people that fell off this list, the two most common, private equity.
Okay.
And then the second one was cable television, were the two biggest to fall off of this list.
Absolutely.
There are half a dozen people in both fields that fell off the list.
Yeah. And cable's just going to get worse.
I would agree with that. I don't know how they save it. I don't think you can.
It'll adjust just like everything else.
Do you think so?
But
because I think if people still died when they were 65, I think cable TV would be screwed.
I don't
think
disagree
the
with
only
that.
thing keeping cable TV afloat is that people are living longer and longer. Because if people were croaking 20 years before what they are now, like they used to, I mean, seriously.
You just worked croaking into it.
Isn't that what they do? You croak. You never heard that before?
Yes, I have.
We're all going to do it. We're all going to croak at some point. It's going to happen, whether we want it to or not. Just some other tidbits, like if you go through some of this stuff. Trump was also off the list for the first time in 25 years. So him and Oprah were like the longest tenured, and then now they fell off of it.
I wonder how their friendship is now.
Who's that?
Oprah, she used to call him the Donald. He was a regular guest.
See, this is before me.
Yes.
Okay.
They were really, I say really good friends. Like, I don't know if they had barbecues together, but they got along well. She would refer to him as the Donald.
Okay.
And he was a guest on the show, and he was.
Well, remember, you and I had talked like a year ago. There was a time where Donald Trump was fun. There was a time where even if you didn't agree with what he said, like through the 2000s, like he was funny. Like you were either laughing at him because you thought he was funny, or you were laughing at him because he was ridiculous and you couldn't believe Donald Trump. Like he was like a caricature.
He is in the WWE Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
He was at WrestleMania something.
Yeah. No, there was a time where you could talk about Donald Trump and it wasn't polarizing. Like he was an entertainer. He was a funny guy who had money. The cutoff to me.
He was Cuban-ish, Mark Cuban-ish.
Yeah.
To a degree.
Mm-hmm. Cuban's a little more put together, but yes.
Yes, I would think.
But I get your point. Another one, the exact number was a 40% increase over the last year. $4.5 trillion.
You're not going to believe this.
What am I believing?
Remember when Jerry dumped all those mints all over my desk?
They're all gone.
I think I've eaten them all.
You know, I actually had someone mention to me, I haven't brought this up to you, and this is a good time to do it.
Is it going to be insulting? Oh, found some.
It is insulting. Someone said, they're like, does Mark eat during the show? And I was like, I don't think he eats. They're like, he has something in his mouth. I was like, I think he takes a mint and he puts it in the middle of the show and then like talks with the mint in his mouth. And they were like, well, you can definitely tell.
They're all over my desk. I've told this, have you been in here before? These little white lifesavers, which are delicious. Oh, here, I put it in front of my shirt so I can see. So Jerry bought them. You know, he's one of those office guys that bring in stuff. And Jerry put them in a basket out in the front on the conference table when you walk right in. And every time I walked by the conference table, I would take one. And I got to the last one day. And I said, please don't ever buy these again, because I physically can't, as like a moth to the flame, I cannot walk by them and not take one. And being the wonderful person that he is, that night he went out and bought a whole bag of them and came in and dumped them all over my desk.
Okay.
So I've been eating, I think I'm down to 3 because I found 4 more. And of course I ate one.
I believe it. So here's the last thing I wanted to talk about this list, the Philanthropy Score. Okay. So they did a Philanthropy Score 1 through 5, 1 being the lowest, 5 being highest.
Jeff Everett got a 0.
How they did this Philanthropy Score, it does not say. Like there's not like a key or like a explanation on here as to what they were. However, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people who scored a maximum 5.
8 out of 400.
8 out of 400. Well, let me double check. Yes, 8 out of 400 who scored a maximum 5 in philanthropy. Out of the 8 people, their ages were 91, 92, 91, 89, 84, 82, 85, and then the youngest was 47.
How many did you say? 9?
There were 8.
8. So 7 of them were 84 and older.
Yes, 82 and older.
82 and older. And then one of them was in his 40s.
Yes.
Or her 40s.
So I have 2 thoughts on this. Part of it is it makes sense. As you get older, your time lessens. And so what are you going to do with all of this? You know why
they're time lessons? Because they're about to croak.
They are about to croak. And so you start to give away the money that you realize you're never actually going to use, regardless of how much you accrue. That part of it makes sense to me. The part that doesn't make sense to me, the part that worries me is that process made sense when the richest people in the world had an average age of 55, 65, 75. The average age of the richest people in the world is not going to be 80, 82, 84. So you have this abundance of wealth. And based off of these philanthropy scores, they would tell you that the majority of that wealth does not get released until these people get into their 80s.
Or 90s.
Or 90s. And most of these
people are hoarding it.
Most of these people didn't get to, for example, Warren Buffett's at 102 billion. He's 91 years old.
Warren Buffett is 91?
Yes. Okay. So now we are about to be in a society where the names are no longer going to be Gates and Buffett. The names are going to be dudes that are 35. And if their philanthropy scores are going to be 1, 2, until they're in their 80s, the math does not work. It's certainly not a good thing.
Right.
That was my initial thought when I saw this.
And I would agree with that. And how old are you?
I am 34.
And your philanthropy score would be a 0.
My philanthropy score, given my funds, I actually think I'd have an okay philanthropy score.
Do you have a philanthropy heart, though?
It depends. Well, no. You know what it is? I have a philanthropy.
I appreciate your honesty.
Because this is part of it. Philanthropy, there's this idea of you give money to who you like, or you give money, you spread it around. I have to believe in the cause. I have to believe that this is a good thing and it's the right thing. And so my philanthropy score would be low because there are things that I just wouldn't. You and I've talked, full disclosure, I'm not religious. I am agnostic. And so a lot of philanthropy and a lot of where people put their donations and put their money in is into the church. I am not one of those people. So I doubt I would ever score a 4 or a 5 on the philanthropy scale. I just think I'm too nitpicky to the cause and me believing in the cause.
I was going to say Grinchish.
You think so?
Your heart is 2 sizes too small.
I don't think so. No? So real quick before we go, because I wanted to do this. If we go back to the top 10, Jeff Bezos, philanthropy score is a 1.
I was going to say 1, and I was just kidding.
You would be correct. Elon Musk is a 1. Mark Zuckerberg is a 2. Bill Gates is a 4. Larry Page of Google is a 1. Sergey Brin is a 1. Larry Ellison is a 1.
Which one was Larry Ellison again?
He's software. He's kind of bounced around in the early stages of development. And then Warren Buffett is a 5. Steve Ballmer is a 2. Michael Bloomberg, who's 79 now, is a 4.
Which one was the one? Ballmer?
Ballmer is a 2.
What was he again? Who did he?
He owns the LA Clippers, Microsoft.
He was a Microsoft guy. Okay.
Yes.
I knew he was a sports guy, and I couldn't figure out how.
I realize that's not really the point of what we're talking about.
No, but I'm just trying to relate to.
Got it.
Because how did Cuban get rich?
He started a newspaper route when he lived in Pittsburgh as a child.
What?
He actually sold garbage bags door to door in Pittsburgh when he was 13. You've never heard about this?
How did he get rich?
I don't. Tech. I don't know the exact story, but it was.
He sold garbage bags door.
When he was 13, he used to sell garbage bags door to door. Because back then, Sam's Club didn't deliver. You couldn't. there were certain household items that weren't delivered to your door ever, like a newspaper.
Okay.
So he realized if he took everyday household items and just weekly went door to door, people would buy them because they'd be like, oh yeah, I'm almost out of trash bags. And they would buy and he would jack up the price of them.
So he took like a little red wagon around the neighborhood and
Probably. I mean, I wasn't there, but yeah, something like that.
Well, you know the story, so I'm asking. Like, he didn't drive them around.
I don't know the color of his wagon or if he had.
Well, little red
but
wagon.
Yeah,
it's just just this.
I understand, but your question was, did he? And I'm telling you, I don't know. But yes, he would go door to door and he would try to sell like household items that he knew would need to be replaced like weekly, monthly, that just couldn't be delivered anyway else.
Huh.
Mm-hmm. He was barely a teenager, I believe, when he started doing it. So when you go through those philanthropy scores, it's, well, this is the other part too. How old do you think Elon Musk is? I was shocked when I saw this.
Now, see, now I'm not trying. I'm picturing Elon Musk, but I'm trying to think of you being shocked. So I'm going to say 50.
He's 50. I never would have guessed that.
You thought younger?
I would have guessed like high 30s, low 40s. I never would have thought he was 50.
I guess. I don't know.
Ever.
I think one of the things, as you were talking about, when we go back to, well, okay. So obviously Mark Cuban, from day one, like one of his things was not how do I entertain myself? How do I, it was how do I make money?
Yes.
Even as a teenager.
Yep.
So when that is the way you're wired,
mm-hmm.
I'm looking for entrepreneurial opportunities.
Right.
He is probably going to succeed in life.
Yes.
And when we
by his definition, he is going to succeed.
Correct. By his definition. Very well said. So when we looked at the pandemic and, who got rich and who didn't get rich and all the things that we learned about life and society of a pandemic
mm-hmm.
or because of the pandemic. And one of the things that we learned was when we gave the people that were hurt, waitresses, cooks in restaurants, and these people who were hurt because of the pandemic, because their business got shut down. So we gave them money. Well, they'd obviously found a way to survive until this stimulus check came in. Then the stimulus check comes in. And instead of them thinking, oh, I can save it. Oh, I can pay off debts. Oh, I can do other things with it. They're like, well, look, this is like a free paycheck. I don't have to go to work for 2 weeks.
Right.
And that is how, so the society that's looking to make money, that's looking to advance, it's looking to, and then there's ones that literally the paycheck to paycheck people
mm-hmm.
were given a free paycheck. So they're like, 2 weeks vacation.
Right.
And that is what we saw.
So one of the fascinating things, because we talked a lot about that like earlier this year, but one of the fascinating things that I read about was in different parts of the world, they gave smaller stimuluses, they gave larger stimuluses, right? Some countries gave like a quarter of what we gave. Other countries gave like half a year's worth of salary and basically said like, stay home, right? What they found through those studies was when you gave a paycheck amount, people spent it like a paycheck. When you gave people a lump sum that exceeded their paycheck, whether it was a month, 3 months, 6 months, they saved it because in their head, it is no longer a paycheck. It's a windfall or it's a savings or it's something other than a paycheck. And so the psychology of what you give people. So that's
interesting.
So this is the crazy part about it is if you go through America and you look at paychecks of like the average worker, the minimum wage worker and stuff like that, a lot of them make somewhere, $1,200, $1,600,
right.
$2,000. I don't think that it is a coincidence that when we gave stimulus checks, it lined up with the average minimum wage worker's paycheck because it was intricate to certain people in the administration, to companies around the country, that stimulus check went to you and then went back into the economy. And that is so the psychology of it all is very fascinating.
Mm-hmm. And that I agree with everything you just said.
Mm-hmm.
They were the people in power wanted, oh, please like us because
mm-hmm.
we just gave you money,
yeah.
but please spend it.
Yes.
And people were in the habit of, I get a check for about this much and I turn around and blow it. And that's a good point. I don't think that the powers that be saw the work stoppages and shortages, even to the point of like, again, we've gone over this before, but you talk to people in the restaurant industry and they said, forget about the waitresses calling off and forget about the cooks calling off. Like, we can't get trucks, we can't get deliveries.
Yeah.
So how do you, when you're dealing with fresh lettuce and fresh tomatoes, we can store napkins till the cows come home.
Sure.
We can't store lettuce for weeks on end.
So now that we're kind of removed, I mean, we're still in kind of a weird space as far as the country goes, but now that we're removed from it and we can reflect back on almost 2 years worth of pandemic times, the weird part about it was you said they didn't see it coming. That like administrations and politicians and different people never saw it coming. And my response would be, why would they? Because I find it hard to believe that they would be able to relate to the average minimum wage worker. Like, they're not.
That's true too.
They're not around them every day. They don't know the struggles. They don't know what a $1,600 check means to them. The only thing that they knew is that in order for them to spend it, it had to be around what they would typically get in a paycheck. And if they gave a lump sum, if they gave 3 months worth, and that's why you got multiple checks. It wasn't because they wanted this, they thought we'd get out of it and then we'd only have to give one check. They just didn't want to give you a lump sum and then have people go, well, I'm going to split this check in half and I'm going to put half of it away and then I'm going to go spend the other half. They wanted every.
I thought they wanted to remind you how nice they were.
That might be part of it, but I don't think that was it.
You've made multiple good points today.
I'm slowly. It's funny. I try not to sound like righteous. Like, sometimes I listen back to some of this and I'm like, God, I sound so pretentious and so righteous. But this is something like the pandemic and the financial afterfall and just how people. I've been saying for 3 months. I thought that this fall and winter was going to tell us a lot about society, and I'm just fascinated by it. And it's not even like a right, wrong, left, right. Like I just like to see how society is going to react and why people do the things they do. And this last 2 years has been very unique in that sense.
Well, it's funny about, to go back to when you were talking about lump sum or giving the checks in spaces. I remember when I was in college and a friend of mine who was also off in college, her parents gave like, here's some money, and she would blow it, and then she would call her parents for more. Yeah, I'm like 19 or 20, and I wanted to sit down with this person's parents, and the parents were very successful, and say, you're doing this wrong. You should give her as much, you should calculate out what spending money or however you want to walking around money she's going to have for the semester. And you should give it to her the first day of the semester and say, don't call me for any more, and teach this person how to budget it. But there was never any. It was, I just spend it till it's gone. I'll call dad. I'll spend it till it's gone. I'll call dad. And so you're saying from the stimulus thing, that's kind of what they did again.
That's what they did.
Here's your check, spend it. Oh, here's another.
The difference is they were hoping you would spend it. That's
correct. And that's for the good of their business, which was
it's
running
not your
the country.
dad, Sam. It's your Uncle Sam.
Very good.
You like that?
Well done.
We're going to end on that.
You had a good day today.
You think so?
Much better day than the Yankees had yesterday.
Do you think it's because I ate before the show? Should I eat before the show?
No, I think it's because we just talked about one topic that is like, this is in your wheelhouse.
I will say this.
You pull out the 400, because before we even started, you were like, it's not just fascinating who's up, it's who's off, which businesses are trending. Like you could talk about this for 4 hours.
The Forbes stuff? Yes. Because the industry side of things, who's in, who's out, and even just how did people get onto the list? Is there a trend? Is that, what type of person makes this list? The philanthropy thing is fascinating.
It's fascinating.
That is really, because what does that mean? If granted, some of these people are older than I thought. Musk 50, Bezos is 57. I don't think people realize Bezos is almost 60. I think in a lot of people's heads,
I would have thought he wasn't young.
Okay. See, I think the majority of people think he's like mid 40s, late 40s. like kind of a middle-aged person, but he's coming up on his 60s.
Did we ever figure out what his ex-wife's doing?
I don't know.
Is she around?
I don't. You
She hasn't called me.
You should be more concerned about than me. Larry Page is 48. Zuckerberg's 37. The other Google guys is 48.
Who's Larry Page again? I can't keep up.
Google.
Larry Page is
Google. The two Google guys are 48 and 48. I mean, if their philanthropy score isn't going to be 5 or 4 until they're in their 80s, like what does that? I mean, that's just a different ballgame than what we're used to. We are used to people accumulating wealth through their 30s and 40s. You maybe, if you're one of the lucky people in this country, you hit $1 billion when you're in your 60s, and then you start your how do you even say it?
Philanthropic?
Your philanthropic quest leading into your twilight years. But now, Zuckerberg's 37.
Right.
I mean, his philanthropy score is going to be below a 3 for 30, 40 more years. Oh.
So here's one of the things that people have to remember about these people too. They are challenge driven. They are, they didn't get to this. Like I know in the social network, Zuckerberg kind of stumbled into this idea of Facebook, but there has been a constant, like Facebook is always evolving. It's always, they haven't just like, oh, here it was, we did well, yay, let's go play golf. Like there's this challenge of trying to make it better and better.
Right.
So all these, Bezos doesn't want to wake up in the morning and be bored. So he's looking for a new challenge, and whether it's making the business better, making it a new business. So I would suspect for some of these people, it has to be, they're going to have a total change of heart. Like, how can I do this in a philanthropic way? And this can be my mission in life, but they have to be busy and work for it. I'll bet Bezos, as society complains about working a 40-hour week, and not complains, but you know what I mean. I'll bet Bezos works 40 hours a week still.
I bet he works more.
I'll bet he does too.
Yeah.
Because that's what he enjoys. That's what it's not because he needs to. We all work because we need to. He works because it's a challenge.
I think the number one thing that gets lost in this is first generation. When you work for it yourself, when you are the dude who has made the money. So if you are Bezos and you have made this happen, you're Zuckerberg and you have made this happen, it is much harder to let go of it. Whereas if you are the heir to a fortune,
that's a valid
point. That's the other part of this is, the Walmart kids, and you have these different, and you like Buffett gets into his older age, and when it's his heirs take over, will they be much more willing to dive into it? I think that's the challenge with people like Zuckerberg and Bezos is like, it is their money. Like I can't, after everything that we just talked about, and I'm very happy to sit here and say like, it is theirs. It's their money. What they do with it is completely up to them. I would just say like from a society standpoint, it's kind of scary because I don't think as first generation, like building it up and making that money, I just think it's going to take them a long time to let go of it. I think that philanthropy score is going to be low. Now, and once it's passed on,
when you're back to these people that they didn't, if what's been most fun for Mark Cuban, and is he on the list? I assume he's not on the list.
You know what? I did not see him. But okay. There's 400 names here.
Right. But if he, as a 12-year-old kid, is figuring out ways in his neighborhood to go around and make money, that's what's fun for him, to go around and make money. So now when he can do whatever he wants to do, like for you, it's fun to watch basketball.
Right.
And if you were rich, you would watch more basketball because you would have more time to watch. What's fun for him is figuring out ways to make money, whether it's through a TV show, whether it's through tech, whether it's through owning a sports team, whether it's through, and I'm sure he knows which ones are better investments. Maybe owning this isn't as good as owning that, and it's fun.
Right.
But when he wakes up in the morning, he doesn't think about how can I give my money away? He thinks, how can I make money? Because that's the way his brain has always worked.
He is number 247. He's worth $4.5 billion. Guess how old Mark Cuban is? 63. A little older than what I would have guessed. Mark Cuban founded video portal broadcast.com with fellow Indiana University alum Todd Wagner in 1995. They sold it to Yahoo for $5.7 billion in 1999.
I think wasn't his gig that he figured out, because he's obviously a sports fan, that he figured out through the internet, if you want to be able to listen to your favorite team's broadcast, you should be able to hear it anywhere. And I thought that was part of their platform to...
It's possible. I mean, he's
I
been
thought
in
it was
sports,
about sports broadcasting through the internet.
He has been in the sports world for a very long time. Like, even when he was younger, I remember him being involved in sports and being around. Before he even owned the Mavericks, I remember his name like being thrown around.
He seems like such a fun guy. If one of those behind the scenes, if you ever find out that he was a jerk, kind of like they've said that Ellen is a jerk.
Okay.
If you found, that would be crushing to me.
Because
like, remember the time he worked in Dairy Queen? He made the joke about somebody at Dairy Queen, and they were like, "Oh, you're talking about minimum." And he went and worked a shift at Dairy Queen. He worked the counter, and do you remember that story, or don't you remember that one? He made some comment about something, and it's just a Dairy Queen worker, and he was trying to be insulting or degrading, but it wasn't. He just picked a generic, like when people say you're going to be flipping burgers. And so the Dairy Queen, they're like, "What's wrong with Dairy Queen?" And he went and put on the uniform and worked a shift. And he was at the counter and like, "Can I take whatever?" And I don't know how long he was there, but he seems like a good guy.
The other thing on this too, and we've already touched on this, but just very quickly, there were, out of the 400, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people made it onto the list with cryptocurrency alone. All 7 were not on the list as of last year.
Oh, I'm sure.
Those 7 rank number 32, number 60, number 172, number 162, number 261, 377, and 333.
Now,
the next highest new, and no other source, no other field had more than 1 person enter the list. Cryptocurrency had 7.
Now, it's been getting beat up lately, hasn't it?
Well, it's been getting beat up in the context of like in the last 3 months. So for example, if you look at a 3-month chart, it got beat up. But if you scan out and you look at where it was 2 years ago,
an adjustment is basically what...
It's no different than your typical
any
stock. It's not like, it wasn't a crash. It wasn't. So certainly the 3-month chart is brutal. But if you scan out, like before the pandemic, I mean, people are up. I mean, there's people up 35 to 100% on their crypto over the last 2 years, despite what just happened the last 3 months. So the problem is you have the majority of the country walking around that didn't buy any crypto until 3 months ago. Then they buy their crypto, it crashes, and so people walk around going like, "Oh, I'm down thousands of dollars in crypto." But there's a faction of people who have been in it for years, and they're walking around and their portfolio's up 100%.
Right.
So it's all the context of when you got in and how you did it. In the last week or so, it has gone up significantly.
It's going back.
There's a couple of cryptos right now that in the last week are up like 15 to 50%, depending on what you have.
So like, other than the big ones, what else?
So the big one right now, so I'm invested, like, this is not fine. What do I have to do? This is not financial advice. Don't listen to me. One of the big ones right now is gaming. So the way you used to play on a Nintendo, the way your son probably play Xbox, PlayStation.
Yes.
Okay. What they're doing now is they are creating games onto the blockchain, and on the blockchain they have their own tokens, their own currency, their own messaging. They have everything's worked into the blockchain itself, and so there is oodles of money being made off of crypto gaming and blockchain gaming right now. You will know in 4 to 5 years, you will not have a video game system. You will play your games. Madden will have its own blockchain, and you will have tokens that you buy, and you can play with this player, you can boost this player, have special uniforms, or it's going to have its own ecosystem on the blockchain. Instead of just sliding your parents' credit card, you'll have to buy the Madden coin. But the neat thing about that is if you believe in the game Madden, like if I think the game Madden is here to stay forever, I can now invest in the game Madden. I buy the Madden token, more people use the game, more people buy some of the token, it goes up in price, and I sell the token without ever playing the game. It's going to change everything.
But isn't there an unlimited amount of tokens, and therefore
Correct,
there's
which is why the value goes up.
But isn't that like inflation? Doesn't that isn't it like the peso? Doesn't it make each coin less valuable because there's an infinite supply of
no,
coins?
because it's the same way the dollar works, where you can create more. Like you have gas fees, and you have they're called gas fees, but basically what you do is you burn the token. So essentially what ends up happening is those fees and everything replenish, and it goes into making more tokens. So it kind of feeds on itself like a cyclical wheel.
Okay.
Yeah, it's here to stay. I mean, this is the other irony, because we've talked about it before, and like, is it real? Is it here to stay? And I always say to you, I'm like, it's not going anywhere. I'm not saying it's gonna be,
right. It's just, how does it eventually settle into society?
It's how is it going to eventually settle in society? And what I would say to you is, a year ago, nobody was on this list. There's no chance that it's not here. I mean, there's 7 people on this list for the first time.
So next year there'll be 35.
It's unbelievable how fast this is happening.
What's the big one? The biggest crypto? Bitcoin. So how is that? That got beat up for 3 months. Is that coming back?
It's back up. Actually, today there was a big thing. It's over $50,000 of Bitcoin for the first time since like the spring.
August. Oh, yeah. Since spring.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's rallied. It's just like any other stock. Like there's highs and lows.
When did Bitcoin found?
Great question. It's over 10 years.
I was going to say it's been more than a decade. Right?
It's pretty old from that sense.
Was it the first one?
I don't know if it was the first one.
But it was among the first one.
So Bitcoin right now is at $54,632 a Bitcoin.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it used to be at a quarter.
Oh my God, it used to be fractional. I mean, there were people who bought Bitcoin when it was at 0.00001. I mean, it was. I mean, I personally, I've invested in cryptos that were fractional. I mean, I got it, like Dogecoin was fractional. Like there's things.
What's Doge at now?
Doge was over 25 cents when I woke up.
It's still right around there.
Mm-hmm.
It's been basically there for a while now, right?
Yeah.
Since spring.
Yep. And so this is the funny, like I have friends and family members who bought Doge when it was 2 cents. And they're thrilled. Like oh my gosh. I have friends and family members who bought it when it was 50 cents, and that, and they're looking around and half their money's gone. So it all.
Well, the other fascinating thing to me about it, who has no Doge, if I'm like, say I bought it at a nickel, so it's up, 1, 2, 3, 5 times. And so I put in, and this is, I don't own any of it, so I'll just make this up. I put in $10,000 worth at a nickel. Now it's worth $50,000.
Yeah.
Which is great. Do you sell it and cash it? Because if it goes back down and Doge isn't one, or if you sell it, you take your $40,000 profit, and then 10 years from now, it's worth $54,000, and now you're jumping off a bridge.
Yeah, that's the age-old question. The people that I trust and that I read about and I watch their videos and that I consider the loyalists of cryptocurrency, like they are in it, in the thick of it, and they've been there from the beginning. They all say the exact same thing. Figure out what you can afford to take out, and just incrementally, when there's a high, take 5% out, take 10% out, take 15% out. Decide what is the right amount. But that's their whole thing, is like, when you see a high, take some out. When you see a low, put some in, and just kind of ride the wave and do what feels comfortable. And their whole thing is like, do not yank it all or do not dump it all in. You've got to figure out what that increment is of what you want to take for yourself. And
because when you look at like when Bitcoin was a penny, and if you'd have bought whatever, and now it's at this much, but what are the odds that how many people could have held on to it? When it was a penny and it got to $100, their parents were like, sell it, sell 100%. It, sell it. And now it's at $54,000.
100%.
That would be so.
One of the biggest challenges that people don't realize is a lot of the cryptocurrencies that are being sold right now, they are on specific blockchains. So imagine all these cryptocurrencies and their transactions belong on a blockchain. But the blockchains can't necessarily sell across blockchains. Okay. So what happens a lot of times is you'll buy a cryptocurrency because you want to buy another cryptocurrency. So for example, the second most popular cryptocurrency right now is called Ethereum.
Okay.
So people will buy Ethereum, but the only way to buy the other cryptocurrencies is to use your Ethereum to buy it, which is why the price of Ethereum keeps going up. because I can't just buy cryptocurrency X. I have to buy Ethereum to buy cryptocurrency X. But the challenge then is you collect all this Ethereum, and then the fear is if you buy these other cryptos and they don't work out, but Ethereum keeps going up, you've lost out. You've missed out on it. So one of the challenges of the crypto world is where do you put your eggs, and how do you decide how much to spend your Bitcoin or your Ethereum on these other cryptos?
Right.
It's what I like about crypto is that it has given the normal person, the normal schmuck, if you are willing to learn and you are willing to dive in, you can get on the floor of some of this stuff. And we've seen it. I mean, it has made, listen, they're not schmucks on that list, obviously. They were smart and they understood some stuff other people didn't. But in 10 years ago, 20 years ago, those people don't stand a chance.
No, I get it.
They're never making that list. And now, like, they are on that list. And I'm not saying that will happen for everybody. But my point being is it used to be this world where, like, you had to call up your broker and there were fees and you had to wait and you never knew what was happening. What I like about crypto is that world is non-existent. You are in control. You have the ability to decide what you want to do.
I'm with you.
It's there.
All right, we've been on there's nobody listening anymore.
Nobody?
Nobody.
Probably
we've been
not.
on for a long time.
Thank you guys for watching the Midday Show. Thank you to all of our sponsors. And be sure to go to NorthcentralPa.com for all your local news. Any advice?
No, I mean, baseball season's essentially over.
Go Red Sox. I'm Jeff Everett.
I can't believe you just said that.
He's Mark Messina.
You have to root for the Rays now.
Enjoy your Wednesday night. We'll see you tomorrow.
They don't play yet. They play tomorrow.